Good evening, good afternoon. Welcome back to High Top Sports Oregon. The afternoon after a big Friday night matchup against the Spoiler Makers, and the Ducks go ahead and just take care of business, as always, looking like probably the best team in the Big Ten, kicking down the door in the Big Ten, and being a great team. You know, good teams win the games they should, great teams dominate the games they should. How you feeling, Derek?
Yeah, man, it's one of those things where you played Purdue the night before, so it's really hard to, get yourself too excited. But Oregon did pitch their first road shutout since the early 90s. So, I mean, that's something to hang your hat on. The offense, it was clicking for the most part the vast majority of the night. The defense, there was obviously some things that I would like to see cleaned up, which we'll get into a little bit here. But overall, I mean, they pitched a shutout on the road in a hostile Big Ten environment. So I really can't be too upset about that.
For sure, for sure. And let's thank our proud sponsors, BetUS. Right now at betus.com, using the code YouTube150, you get 150% back on your first two deposits up to $2,000. Yes, betus.com. Go check them out. We're going to do a little gambling here in a second. Let's go ahead and get into that potent Ducks offense. Dylan Gabriel, quarterback. He just runs that offense so efficiently. It's deadly. Yes, he had a bad INT last night, but you know what? I'll take it right now against Purdue than a big impact game. And every single time he's thrown an INT, it really hasn't mattered because the Ducks are usually up, and it's not a drive to where he had to have it. It was a little bit overthrow. Didn't get his feet set when he was scrambling to his left. It happens. But he absolutely killed the zone. He got Evan Stewart going very early, two touchdowns, 290 yards, and just looked solid.
Yeah, he did. He really, I mean, they have two very different styles in a sense, but he does remind me of Bo Nix in a way. He distributes the ball and gets the ball into the hands of his playmakers. He was 21 for 25, so very efficient when he does let the ball go. Obviously, that interception, it was a bad one. He did have a man open there and just, I mean, he simply overthrew it. And like you said, it's college football. These things are going to happen from time to time, even to the best players in the country. Um, One thing I would like to see him improve on, though, can't keep it all sunshine and rainbows, is like there are a couple of reads that he continues to miss, and it's one of those things where it's going to happen in college football. But he did miss Tez on a wide open touchdown down the seam early on in the game. He missed Evan Stewart in the corner a little bit later in the game. So it's just these kind of like minor things that obviously I'd like to see cleaned up. I'm not going to complain too much about a 35-point road victory whatsoever. I'm very happy with their performance. But if we're getting nitpicky, there are a few things that I would like to see happen. And I think, as we continue to roll out through the season, that those mistakes are going to become fewer and far between just as he gets a little more comfortable, offense as we continue throughout the year.
For sure. And on that, actually, I'm glad you bring that up because on that throw, he had a wide open receiver deep down the field behind the safety. Would have been an easy touchdown. But again, getting harassed, rolling out, I believe to his left, off platform, overthrew it. And if he could just set hhis feet for a second and read that wide receiver was back behind the safety, would have been an easy touchdown. But listen, we're not going to beat on the kid. 35-point road victory. Jordan James. The kid is starting to look like a true Big Ten running back, and when I say that, that's a good thing, right? A lot of good running backs coming out of the Big Ten. Listen, 5 yards a tote, can do it inside, can do it outside, good pass blocking, and then when you need them down in the goal line, an easy two touchdowns. Boy, oh boy, that kid is starting to really come on.
Yeah, he is. And I know there were a lot of Oregon fans who were kind of concerned during last night's game because, he did split true time with the other running backs. But if, you guys were able to catch our pregame show, this is one thing we kind of talked about. I talked about how I thought they were going to try to force feed Noah Whittington throughout the game today just so they can, I don't want to say give Jordan James some rest, but not lean on him so heavily. After the Ohio State game, I believe he had something like 20 some carries. That's not necessarily something you want to do with your workhorse running back, especially if you have a stable behind him, so you can kind of prolong the longevity of his health throughout the season. So Oregon fans, rest assured, Jordan James is fine. It was just more one of those things where it was a great opportunity to get some of those other backs some work. But yeah, man, it's I can't understate or overstate, excuse me, just like how important he is to that offense and what he does. Just because he is so explosive, even when they're stacking the box, he's an explosive player who you need to keep an eye out for, and that really opens up the passing game. Which, when you have a guy like Dylan Gabriel who can drop back and drop a dime in a bucket, it makes a world of a difference for an offense. Which is why we've been seeing it click for the last couple of weeks here. But he's been phenomenal, and then obviously I want to give Noah Whittington his flowers too. That's
Big catch.
yeah, RB2. Phenomenal hands in the end zone. That would have been a hell of a play for a wide receiver to make in the corner there. But to do it out of the backfield as a running back is even more impressive. And then with the ball in his hands too, you can just feel the explosive nature he brings to the table. And he's another one of those guys where every time he touches the ball, there's big play, explosive opportunity to be had there. So Oregon has a plethora of riches in the backfield. Um, Jay Harris, the D2 transfer, he got his first touchdown last night. I think he had something like a 20-yard carry. So he was looking good. Jaden Lamar was touching the ball. So Oregon really had 4 running backs who got meaningful touches last night, and they all performed decently well considering.
Evan Stewart, our final offensive impact player, went to him early and often in the first drive. He caught I believe he caught 4 catches, a 24-yard average per play. That is giant. His route running is really starting to develop, and his big play ability flashes. My only thing, it seems like he goes MIA a little bit during games.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not blaming him. I think that the ball is just spread out so much to everybody that sometimes it's hard to get him going. But if that first drive showed me you can lean on him and you can really use him if you need to.
Yeah, 100%. He's a guy who we talked about last week. He was my breakout performer for the Ohio State game, which ultimately ended up happening. And over the last 2 weeks, he's really hit his stride. But Dan Lanning, he brought Evan Stewart to Eugene to kind of be that big play capability on the other side of Tez, right? So we didn't necessarily bring him in to be the wide receiver one and take the top off the defense every game for 150 yards and 2 scores. Which, I mean, it would be great, but that's just not the system that Oregon runs. What he is doing, however, is the route running is getting extremely crisp, and then you can just tell the chemistry with Dylan Gabriel is getting better from as week to week progresses. Early on in the season, I know a lot of fans were pretty disappointed with his performance or lack thereof, but it wasn't necessarily a skill thing for him. I think it's just the style of offense Oregon runs. They use him to be that big play capability. Naturally, when you are that type of guy, you're not going to, every game is not going to be a world burner on the stat sheet. But he is finding his stride here, and it's massive for the Oregon offense to be able to have that. We were just talking about, when you have a Jordan James, then you have a Heisman caliber quarterback, then you have Tez Johnson, who is, the best receiver on this Oregon roster
Yep.
right now, and then your number 2 is a 5-star Evan Stewart. Like, this offense is crazy, and when it gets clicking, when you can get everybody on all cylinders, the world's in front of them as to what they can accomplish this year.
For sure. And what's big about that, when he basically took over that first drive, is that's showing that you can really lean on a guy if you need to. Listen, if he's the only one making the catches that night, and that shows me that DG can really feed him the ball, and it's only going to get better week 8, week 9, week 10, and then deep into the playoffs, he's really going to really start popping. And this offense is just going to be it's going to be harder to stop these guys because you have Evan Stewart going, you got Jordan James, you got a bunch of other guys. The tight ends are starting to catch some balls too, so it's one of those things where it's hard to cover for a defense. They are going to make defensive coordinators really lose some sleep over the next few weeks.
100%. It's a great problem to have. It's something Oregon's been blessed with multiple times over the past 20 some years, is just having an explosive offense. And now, for the first time I don't want to say the first time in school history, but one of the first times in school history, now Oregon has true elite defenses multiple years in a row, which, I mean, obviously we know defense wins championships. And when you can combine that with an explosive offense, like I said, that's a recipe for a natty at some point.
For sure, for sure. Let's go ahead. Let's check out our fine sponsor. We got Alabama, Tennessee tonight. This afternoon, 3:30 kickoff, -3 to Bama, +3 for Tennessee, 57 under. I'm going to go ahead, give me the points, and Bama money line. I think that Tennessee has been exposed. I think they're very beatable. We saw a not so great Florida team go in there and absolutely give them all they wanted. And so I think it's one of those things where it's going to be very scary for them to go up against a Bama team. And I know Bama has a lot of holes, but I think this is going to be a possible boat race if that Alabama offense starts clicking. Um, Nico has been inconsistent at best, but go ahead, check out BetUS, our proud sponsors, BetUS at betus.com using code YouTube150. You get 150% back on your first two deposits up to 2K. What are you thinking, Derek, on that bet?
I'm gonna echo exactly what you said. I really like Bama in this one as well. Tennessee, they are a good team. Nico's a great quarterback, but as we've seen over the past couple of weeks, he's really struggled. And I think if he runs into a buzzsaw defense like Alabama tends to have, which is not necessarily even the case this year, so that's a whole different conversation. But I think Nico would have to have a near flawless game, and I think Alabama, it's like they're going to get back on track eventually here. I know they had a tough game against South Carolina last weekend, who South Carolina is just another one of those teams where we can't really get a good grip on them, where, they play a great quality opponent really tough. And then, another week they might play someone inferior, down to their level of competition. So overall, I do like Bama on this one. I like the Bama money line. I think they're going to walk away in Knoxville with a big dub today.
For sure. South Carolina, a team that is average at best, struggling. Like you said, the good teams do beat the teams that they're supposed to willingly. So let's go ahead and check out this Ducks defense, how they played this afternoon. My guy, Devin Jackson, I absolutely love this kid. I think I've been praising him the entire year. All over the field, running sideline to sideline. It feels like he is all over the place, making big time tackles when needed. Open field tackling is not an issue with him. He's physical, and he really shows you his athletic ability. It truly shines on that Oregon Duck defense.
It does. Devin Jackson's a guy who's been around the program for a little bit now, and he was actually my projected breakout player for last year's season, which apparently I came in a year too early. But he's really coming into his own here. I think it helps that he is arguably the fastest linebacker in the country. That truly allows him to be a weapon in coverage, whether it's a slot receiver, a running back, whatever his assignment is, he's able to do it in that regard. As you mentioned, his tackling is very sound too, which is, it's massive. I think a lot of times when you have a really fast linebacking core, what tends to happen is they over pursue these guys.
Yep.
And that leaves them a little susceptible to the big play. And I don't necessarily feel like that's a problem with Devin Jackson.
No.
And don't Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's a first round talent at this point, but I am saying that he is a very sound defender, and when he is one on one in space, I like our odds every single time. I really like that he's also able to create disruption in the backfield too. I believe, he had a sack last night.
Yep.
So he's able to create pressure in that regard as well. So he's really a key piece to this linebacking core, where we thought this was going to be a big Jeffrey Bassa and Justin Jacobs year. It's turning into the year of Bryce Betcher and Devin Jackson. So it's kind of been interesting to see how this linebacking core is unfolded.
For sure. And Devin Jackson is not gonna fit every scheme in the NFL, but I'm gonna tell you he's gonna make a lot of money because he's gonna fit some schemes like Brian Flores and the Minnesota Vikings love guys like him. The Packers love guys like him. Speed all over the field. The Lions love guys like him. There's gonna be certain NFL teams that are foaming at the mouth for Devin Jackson to get into the NFL, and he is gonna be a household name for a team and is going to play absolutely electric. He reminds me of some of the prior Georgia linebackers where, you get a running back or a quarterback leaking out to the, bailing out to the right side, and they're halfway across the field and they make the tackle because they just have the speed for days. That's who he reminds me of, and those guys are getting paid in the league, and I think he's going to get paid in the league. Let's go ahead. Let's check out Mateo Yuga Ungale. I think I did that right. Boasting 3 tackles, a sack. The young D lineman stepped up, I thought, when needed, due to his starting role due to injury. Got a couple guys banged up, but you know what? The kid is out there flashing.
Yeah, he is. And I think, with last night's sack, I think Mateo is sitting at 6 sacks on the season already, is a
Yep.
true sophomore type player. So he's been absolutely phenomenal, and last night was no exception. He absolutely took advantage of Jordan Birch's absence, which, I mean, Mateo gets plenty of playing time when Jordan Birch is in, but it's, all of a sudden he becomes the focal point, and he followed through last night with constant disruption. I know a lot of people, you kind of look at the stat line, you're like, oh, he only had 3 tackles. It's not one of those stat sheets where you look at it and it's eye popping, but if you were watching the game last night, he had a massive impact in that
Yep.
backfield, creating multiple plays for loss, whether it was him directly or assisted on him. Um, he's the type of dude we really needed to step up this year, and I think that's a lot of Oregon's success on that defensive line. I mean, obviously we have a guy like a Jordan Birch and a Derek Harmon, who's currently rated as the highest interior defensive lineman in the country. But when you have a guy like Mateo too, who's really starting to come into his own, a former 5-star recruit, it's like things get really excited for that D line. So it's just another example of him starting to blossom. And I think, he's going to be a massive impact player, and I could see him being a very, very early round draft pick at some point in his career.
Yeah, I know Birch is injured, but and it's a team. But if I'm Birch, I'm starting to maybe see if I can get back, because this kid is, I mean, week after week seems to really just absorb the time, and every time he's on the football field, he's always, getting a pressure or doing something. So I know Jordan Birch is trying to come back as fast as he can. You always want that, but it just shows you the level of depth on this Oregon defense. We kind of were wondering when we were talking preseason, like, listen, we got some guys, we're not 100%, but we'll have to see how they play. And every single guy that has came in there has absolutely stepped up, from Devin Jackson, from Mateo, and a couple of the other players, Hammond, have stepped up and really made big time impacts.
Yeah, and that's kind of one thing we talked a whole lot about before the season started. Was I thought that defensive line was going to be the entire key for the Oregon defense. The secondary, there were just too many playmakers in the secondary to really have to worry about that. But in that defensive line, there was just so many moving pieces, right? When you're bringing in multiple transfers, like the Derek Harmons, like the Jamari Caldwells, and then Mateo, he played as a true freshman last year and he played wonderful. But it's like you have to wait and see, is he going to make that leap in year 2? Jordan Birch obviously came back, who is an extremely impactful player at this point. But he was kind of the only piece, I would say, that we were really confident and knew exactly what we were getting for this coming year. But like you said, it's the entire defensive line, and I'm not even talking about just the starters. I'm talking about the true rotational aspect of it has been phenomenal all year long, and that's been a massive key to Oregon's success.
When should Birch be 100%? Do they know yet?
So Oregon, that's one where they're really tight-lipped with their injury situation. To me, if I'm just kind of reading the room, it doesn't sound like it's severe. I have a strange feeling what probably happened is there was probably a small setback, or they didn't quite see the progression that they wanted to see this week, and then they took the opportunity with a short week at Purdue, who's they were 1-5 coming in, so a struggling team. I think they took that opportunity to kind of treat it like an additional rest week for him. I have a feeling we'll probably see him back next week. But once again, that's going to be one of those things where we're going to want to keep an eye out for those midweek interviews that take place.
For sure. Love to get him back, because this defensive line is really going to take an uptick when that happens. You said the DBs, and let's talk about Kobe Savage. A guy, he had 3 solo tackles. He's done everything right, solid in coverage, also steps into the box if needed for run support. A guy that a lot of people were excited about. And you know what the best thing about a DB is? If they're not calling your name, you are blossoming on the field. You are doing everything right. When you hear their name 24/7, it's usually, unless you're Sauce Gardner, not good.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like, when we were talking about before the show, trying to decide who our defensive impact players were, it was like, I mentioned how I really wanted someone from the secondary, but it's so tough to do so, because the guys who are making the biggest impact typically are the guys who you don't even hear their name mentioned all night, right?
Yeah,
So, like, I mean, we'll get into Kobe here in a second, but like another one I tossed around was a Jabbar Muhammad, who, you take a look at the stat sheet and you're like, well, nothing really happened. And I'm like, that's kind of the point, though.
that's perfect.
Yeah, that's exactly what we want. Oregon was able to hold Purdue to under 100 passing yards all throughout the night. So it's like the secondary was constantly patrolling, doing their job. So we absolutely love that. But Kobe, he's another guy who we brought in from Kansas State. Was a multiple time all second team All Big 12 caliber player. And he's been nothing but solid since coming in here. And I feel like really at that safety position, that was another one of those spots where we knew we had talent, but we didn't really know what that was going to look like coming into this year as to exactly who was going to step up into their roles and in what capacity. But Kobe's done a phenomenal job. He had a turnover with a fumble recovery last night. A couple key tackles, and what I really like about him is he's a really smart defender where he's not going to allow someone over the top, but he can also create an impact in the run game as well, which is a massive advantage to having in your secondary. But Kobe's been absolutely phenomenal throughout the year, and I think he's another one of those players where you can feel him hitting his stride as the season continues, and I think as we move into late October, early November, I think he's going to be another player who has a massive impact on this defense and heading into the college football playoff.
For sure, for sure. And then I'm gonna say this: Muhammad had a big time pass breakup. I think it was a fourth down or third down on a slant. I mean, just looked elite with that big time pass breakup. It was either a slant or a crossing pattern and read it beautifully. Gets out in front of it, swats the ball down, ends a Purdue drive. Beautiful play by him. And like I said, it's we talked about the DBs and it's like, well, you don't hear a lot from them. Well, that's what we want. We don't want to hear a lot from them. That means they're locking down, they're doing their job. A couple coverage sacks, which is good. That means the DBs are holding up on their end and the defensive line is holding up on their end. I got a
Mm-hmm.
nitpick.
Mm-hmm.
They have a walk on sensation. Purdue does, of course, always. Holcomb, I think, is his last name, and he did gash him a couple times for a couple big runs.
Mm-hmm.
And we've said it week after week. We saw it versus Idaho. We saw it versus a couple of other teams. They gotta secure that. You cannot give up those 15, 20-yard gashers.
Yeah, and that's the one though I really had to kind of cap off the show here is Oregon did allow 208 yards on the ground last night, and I don't haven't seen the exact total yet to this point, but I have a strange feeling that this is going to be one of those games where they're up there for most missed tackles in a game yet so far this year. So it's one of those things where it's great that they pitched a shutout on the road, and I really hate to be critical at all because I mean it's pretty impressive to do regardless of who the
Yeah,
opponent is, especially on a short week after a major victory the week before. But with that, Purdue they do have a formidable run game, but at the same time, like you never want to allow 200 yards on the ground to an inferior opponent. It's unacceptable. But yeah, to your point, if that's something that doesn't get fixed up, there's gonna be a team at some point, coming up on the schedule who is absolutely gonna gash Oregon, and it might cost them if they're not able to kind of shore up the defense in that regard.
yeah, Circle Wisconsin. They have a pretty good trio of backs again, like always. I don't know if they're like cloning these kids or what, but I don't know what they're doing. They always have good backs, and I'm gonna tell you that team can gash you on the ground. So listen, they didn't come out hungover after the big win. I'm proud of them for that. They looked from the word go. They looked locked in, ready to play. But we need them to make the point to where they are now an elite team. And elite teams, we go good teams, they show up and they win the games they should. Great teams dominate on all phases, but the elite teams just beat people to sleep. We got to see it on defense. Get the running defense figured out and totally bottleneck them up drive after drive. When we see that, that's when you're hunting for a natty.
Yeah, well, Oregon is one secure run defense away from being a very, very elite team. And that's not me saying they're not an elite team right now. They're the number 2 team in the country. What I am saying, though, is if they're able to patch that hole, they're going to be an absolute juggernaut to stop later in the season come college football playoff time.
For sure, for sure. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you guys for watching the show. As always, I'm Cody. Next time I'll probably be in the studio. We are in the mobile studio today. We're in a church parking lot out in the middle of nowhere. Bubby's got a football tournament, so we are doing that. Derek, great to have you back on. Another big win for the Ducks. And boy, oh boy, can we get one that's like halfway decent kickoff? Maybe, like a 330, that would be great. But we're gonna celebrate the Duck win, and we will see you later. Thank our proud sponsors, BetUS at betus.com. Go check them out, and we will see you later.